I never thought I'd end up wiring electricity into my own mailbox, but that's exactly what I did. And the day I flipped that hidden switch and watched our HOA president, yes, the almighty Karen herself, shriek and stumble back with her hair standing on end like she'd just stuck her head in a socket, I realized this was no longer just a petty neighborhood feud. This was war, and for once I wasn't the one losing. It started in the sweltering heat of June, one of those weeks where the air feels heavy and everyone's restless. At first it was subtle. My envelopes looked strange edges, bent glue seams loose like someone had already thumbed through them. I brushed it off. Maybe the mail carrier was careless. Maybe the humidity messed with the glue. But then it happened again and again. My letters no longer felt fresh out of the mail truck. They felt violated, handled by someone who had no business touching them. I told myself not to be paranoid, that maybe I was overthinking. Until one letter didn't just look off, it never arrived. And it wasn't just any letter. It was my renewed passport. I'd applied weeks earlier, and it should have been in my hands. Every morning I checked the mailbox before work. Every evening again. One night when I couldn't sleep, I even went out at midnight with a flashlight hoping it had shown up late. Nothing. Days dragged into weeks, my nerves stretched thin, and finally I caved. I called the passport agency. The woman on the phone typed into her system and then told me something that made my stomach turn to ice. It was sent out last week. Sent out. Already gone. That's when denial evaporated. This wasn't just sloppy mail delivery. Someone was stealing from me. Federal mail, no less. The realization made me sick. I stood outside staring at my own mailbox like it had betrayed me. Who would be that bold porch pirates bored with packages, a scammer looking for checks or bank details? Or worse, someone right here in my neighborhood? That thought unsettled me most. Because if it was a neighbor, they knew my schedule. They knew when I was gone. They knew too much. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I did what any halfway reasonable homeowner would do. I set out to catch the thief. I went to the hardware store, bought 2 security cameras. I mounted one across the street with a perfect view of my mailbox and the other disguised as a garden light in my yard. Now I had eyes on everything. For 3 days the footage was boring as hell. Kids rode bikes. Amazon drivers tossed packages. Squirrels raided my flower beds. No suspicious hands on my mailbox. By the end of the 3rd day, I almost convinced myself I was crazy. Maybe the passport got lost in the system after all. Maybe all those bent envelopes were coincidences. But then came day 4. Scrolling through this playback, I saw movement by the mailbox. Not casual movement, but careful, sneaky. My pulse quickened. I zoomed in, bracing for some stranger, some porch pirate I'd never seen before. My jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth might crack. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't the mailman. It was Karen. Karen, the glorious HOA president, the self-appointed dictator of our neighborhood. The same woman who'd fined neighbors for leaving trash cans out 5 minutes too long, who once measured a lawn with a ruler, who sent violation letters at 2 in the morning. And now there she was, caught red-handed rifling through my mailbox like it was her personal filing cabinet. I was so stunned I printed the stills right then and there and marched over to her house. When she opened the door, I shoved the image into her hands. "Care to explain this?" I demanded. She barely glanced at it before rolling her eyes. "Oh, please," she said, smirking. "You think this is me? Anyone can Photoshop these days. You could get in real trouble making false accusations like this." I stood frozen. I had crystal clear footage with timestamps, and she dismissed it like it was a joke. Worse, she looked at me like I was the criminal. That smirk of hers, God, it burned into my brain. She thought she was untouchable. I could have gone to the police right then, filed a federal complaint. Mail theft isn't some HOA violation, it's prison time. But that felt too clean for her. Too easy. She thrived on making people feel powerless. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. I was ready to crawl through the mud. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed in bed, replaying her smug denial over and over, wondering if I'd just be better off letting it go. Maybe the fight wasn't worth it. She was the HOA president after all, and I'd seen what she did to people who crossed her. Maybe I was digging my own grave by pushing back. For a moment, just a moment, I actually thought about giving up, about just swallowing the loss and praying she'd get bored. But then something in me snapped. No, enough was enough. Karen had crossed a line, and if I didn't push back, she'd keep trampling me like she always had everyone else. I wasn't about to be her next doormat. So I started researching. I spent nights scrolling through forums, watching videos, asking a buddy who worked in electrical maintenance for advice. What I wanted was something petty, something unforgettable, something that wouldn't land me in jail, but would make sure Karen never forgot the day she stuck her nose where it didn't belong. And then it hit me. Electricity. I would rig my mailbox with a harmless jolt, a sting, a zap, nothing lethal but enough to fry her smug little habit right out of her system. I threw myself into the project like a man possessed. In my garage, I laid out wires, switches, connectors, testing each piece until sparks crackled across the metal. It was almost therapeutic, turning my frustration into something tangible. I ran a hidden switch inside my house so I could flip it on only when I needed. For safety, I kept it off testing carefully so I wouldn't hurt the mailman or myself. According to the camera logs, Karen usually struck around 3 in the afternoon when most people were still at work. Perfect. I had my window. The day of reckoning, I set the stage. I pulled my car out of the driveway and parked it a few blocks away, making it look like I wasn't home. Then I sat inside with a cup of coffee, eyes glued to the live camera feed, every nerve buzzing with anticipation. At noon, the mailman dropped off letters. 2 o'clock ticked by. At 3 sharp, there she was. Karen. She glanced up and down the street like a cartoon villain, then strutted toward my mailbox with the same smug confidence she wore everywhere. She fiddled with the latch, leaned closer, slipped her fingers inside, and that's when I flipped the switch. The crackle snapped through the air. Karen's shriek split the quiet street. She jerked back arms, flailing hair puffing up like she'd just stuck her head into a balloon factory. She staggered, clutching her hand, her eyes wide with shock. I sat there watching adrenaline rushing through me, a grin spreading across my face. I had it all recorded in glorious HD. The sound of her scream rattled birds out of trees, and within seconds curtains twitched and doors cracked open. Neighbors peeked out. Some stepped onto porches. And the moment they saw her, our almighty HOA president hair standing on end like she'd wrestled a toaster, they started laughing. A teenager across the street whipped out his phone and hit record. Karen spun around, flustered, shouting, "This is illegal. This mailbox is rigged." But the more she tried to play the victim, the harder people laughed. She had no idea her performance was already becoming the hottest clip in the neighborhood group chat. Desperate, she snatched the fallen letters, slammed them against my porch, and tried to storm off with dignity. But it was hard to look dignified when your hair's frizzed up like a deranged cartoon. By the next morning, screenshots of her mid-zap expression were plastered online, turned into brutal memes with captions like, "When you find out stealing mail is a federal crime, and Karen meets karma." And here's the kicker, she never called the cops. She could have. She could have tried to press charges against me for rigging the mailbox. But she didn't, because she knew the second she did, I'd release the footage of her committing federal mail theft. And that's not an HOA slap-on-the-wrist fine, that's jail. So she went silent. Dead silent. For a woman who used to send violation letters at 2 a.m., that silence was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. From that day forward, my mailbox stayed untouched. Every barbecue, every block party, every casual conversation somehow circled back to the story of Karen getting zapped. And the look on her face, wild-eyed, humiliated, exposed it lived on in everyone's memory long after the sparks faded. I didn't need to celebrate. The victory was in the quiet, in the safety of my mail, and in the knowledge that the tyrant of our neighborhood had finally been humbled. Sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes with the flip of a switch,